In this video, I'm going to tell you my top 10 board games that I've ever played as of right now here in 2025. I got a few other things I want to talk about as far as board games go. I'm going to put that at the end of the video. I just want to hop into the top 10 right now. So my number 10 board game as of right now is Codenames Duet. Now, Codenames Duet, I've been playing it since 2019. It was number 7 on my top list. I make a top 100 list every few years, so it was number 7 in 2019. Then over the next few years, it oscillated between the 50s and the 30s, and this year it's back into the top 10 at number 10. And the reason is this is my favorite version of Codenames. If you play board games, you've probably played Codenames before, so you understand what I'm talking about. Codenames Duet is the 2-player version, and it adds a little bit more strategy to it. There are times when you can use deduction to help you along with the clue to actually answer the question. And it also includes a kind of a fun little campaign, little notepad thing where it gives you certain challenges as to how to finish games with, X amount of incorrect guesses or in X amount of turns, and so it gives you different ways and different goals to shoot for. I like Codenames Duet. I've played it every few years. I mostly play it with my wife, and it's a lot of fun. Codenames Duet, my number 10. My number 9 on my top games list is College Basketball Dynasty. Now, I talk about this game as much as possible because barely anybody has ever heard of it. College Basketball Dynasty is a free print and play game that you can get online right now. I'll put the links in the description below. And basically, you are cutting out these little slips of paper, and you're a college basketball coach, essentially, and you are drafting players. When you start the game, you draft them into whatever year, freshman, sophomore, junior, or senior you want. But then as the game goes on, you're drafting freshman players as if it's a recruiting class. And you're trying to add up the scores on the pieces of paper. So they get a regular season score and a tournament score. You're trying to reach a points threshold to make the NCAA tournament, March Madness. If you do that, you get into the tournament. I've added some house rules and some rules I found on Board Game Geek to make it a little bit more fun, more dynamic. And then at the end of the year, the best part is everyone moves up a year, seniors graduate, and then you have another incoming class. And you have to decide where on this player board you're going to put your starters, your bench players, because as they move across from freshman to sophomore, sophomore to junior, they're either going to go up or down in skill rating or skill points. If your players get too high in skill points, they might graduate early and go to the NBA, or I guess leave to go to the NBA draft. Or there might be some sort of scandal with them involved. You could also have players who have too many negative skill points, and there could be a scandal involved there as well. So it's a balance between trying to balance this season's success versus the success of future seasons. And it's a pretty light game, but there's enough decisions where it's fun, and I always play in March when March Madness starts, and I'll be doing it again this year. So that's my number 9, College Basketball Dynasty. My number 8 is Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. Now, this game has been in my top 4 probably since I started playing this game. This is the first year it dropped out of the top 4. I still think it's like one of the best games ever designed, because basically what you're doing is you are being Sherlock Holmes. You are presented with a booklet that includes a case, and most of these boxes come with 10 cases, and you read the case. It's kind of presented to you as if you are Sherlock Holmes. And then your job is to use the surrounding materials in the game to determine who to go visit, to interview, to get more information about the case. So included in the game is a directory, which includes names and addresses of people in London, a map, which includes streets and things like that, and then a daily newspaper, and sometimes there's a few other supplementary items in there as well. So essentially, you get the case presented to you, which gives you a few leads to follow up on. You use the map, the newspaper, and the directory to find those people. Then when you found the person, maybe Jane Smith lives on 110 Baker Street, you open up to that address within the case book, and it gives you the interview if you are correct and that person does exist for this particular mystery. It's an awesome, awesome game because you are using your own deduction to solve this mystery, but the gameplay is more like a role-playing game. Like you're really trying to use the materials presented to you to kind of solve these puzzles, and it's very free-flowing. Really, the only resource that's tracked is time. The amount of interviews you give or people you visit is really the only currency in the game, and that's measured against Sherlock Holmes' score at the end, which is always ridiculous. But if you just want to sit down and solve mysteries by yourself or with other people, this game is wonderful, and I always suggest this game to people who are looking for deduction and mystery style RPGs because it really does feel more like a role-playing game than a board game. So that's my number 8, Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. My number 7 is Dominion, the original, the OG deck building game. This was my, it's been oscillating between 3, 5, and 4 on my top games lists since 2015. It was number 9 back in 2023, and now it's back to 7 here in 2025. I love this game because you get the entire experience of a deck builder in a single sitting. You know, I have been playing Magic the Gathering for a long, long time, and this game blew my mind. Dominion blew my mind as a deck building game when I started playing it back in 2015, I think it was. And it's just so fun. It's such a clean deck builder. There's almost no theme. You know, it basically revolves around giving you money, giving you opportunities to buy new cards, and those cards give you either more money, more opportunities to buy cards, or more opportunities to draw cards. Sometimes there's some other mechanics mixed in, but it's just so clean as a game. And that's why I like it. There's obviously a lot of other really, really fun deck builders out there. This one is just pure deck building. What I found, and the reason it's moved off my top 5 essentially, is it's better as a digital experience than an in-person tabletop experience, just because you shuffle so much if you're playing in tabletop. It's a lot cleaner, a lot more fun, a lot faster on digital. So that's my number 7, Dominion. My number 6 is Eldritch Horror. If there's ever a Cthulhu-style game that simulates a role-playing game, but in a single sit-down session, this is it. This is the first year it's on my list. I started playing Eldritch Horror for the first time last year, and it blew me away at the scope of the game, how fun it was, and how it really felt like you were traveling around the world trying to dig up ancient secrets and collaborate with people to defeat the rise of these ancient old ones. Super, super fun game. Very, very epic. It's like a 3 to 4 hour game, I feel like. It always takes longer than I think it might. And so keep that in mind going in, but it really gets a sense of a role-playing game, but in a very, very small sit-down session. So that's my number 6, Eldritch Horror. My number 5 is Magic the Gathering. Magic the Gathering has been number 1 or number 2 on my list ever since I started making these lists 10 years ago, and this is the first time it has fallen out of the number 1 or number 2 spot. The main reason is I have not been able to connect well with one of the themes coming out in the last few years. I loved the idea of a Lord of the Rings set. I think anybody who's talked about Magic the Gathering or played it in the past has always said, oh, wouldn't that be cool if there was a Lord of the Rings set? But I just didn't connect with the art and style feel of that particular set. I know a lot of people did. I think it's their best-selling set of all time. It just didn't work as much for me. And a lot of the sets coming out this year don't really appeal to me. That's totally fine though, because I still really enjoy the game, and I really don't buy the cards anymore unless a set is an absolute banger like Innistrad was. I generally play drafting if I think a set is cool. I play EDH or Commander with some friends, although that has become more cumbersome because over time our decks seem to get better and better, and so these games go from maybe 45 minutes up to 3 hours or 10 minutes if I play some of my friends' decks who have really optimized them. But my favorite mode of play in Magic the Gathering is Horde. Horde is a solo mode where you're playing against a deck that has, custom rules for the deck. And the classic Horde mode is zombies. Basically, it's mostly filled with tokens. About 60% of the Horde deck is tokens. And you flip over cards until you get to a non-token card. And usually that card buffs the zombies or adds a mega zombie or messes with your creatures. And it's a really fun challenge to play against. So that's why it's my number 5. It's because of these other modes of play that do not involve staying up to date and continually buying cards for the CCG, Magic the Gathering. My number 4 is Spirit Island. Spirit Island was my number 4 in 2023 when I first played it. And this is a super, super fun, really thinky game. The theme is that you are spirits on an island. It's a collaborative game, and you're defending against colonists or colonialists or people who want to take over your island. Essentially, you get certain powers, you get a certain amount of actions you are using your powers and actions each turn on a board to try and manipulate some of the native populations or some of the colonists and using these powers to basically get them out of your island and accomplish a certain amount of objectives. It's very, very fun. It does not run into the problem that sometimes collaborative games do, where one person kind of quarterbacks and tells everyone else to do, because it is honestly probably too complex for that. Everyone is really focused on what they can do, but oftentimes there's collaboration between turns saying, hey, there's a big group of colonists here that is going to pretty much explode out into my region. Can anybody help me remove some of these so we can avoid that, pandemic style explosion problem? So there's a lot of collaboration, but it's a super fun game. If you haven't heard of it or haven't played it and you like collaborative games, it is a little more complex, but I do suggest you check it out. My number 3 is Ark Nova. Ark Nova is definitely the most complex game on my list, and I'm totally obsessed with this right now. As of January of this year, so that's about 1 month ago, I've played this 5 times on Board Game Arena, and I have 2 correspondence games going as of right now. I absolutely love this game. Basically, in Ark Nova, you're building a zoo. You're putting little not cages, what are they called? Little enclosures out on a map. And then when you're able to pay for these animal cards that you're accruing, you put them in the enclosures, and that gives you more points. But the more points you get, that's the more money you have. But also, the more conservation projects you support, you get more resources. And so it's this really fun ramp up of a game where it might take you, when the game starts, 3 turns to be able to play an enclosure and play your first animal to get you your first points. But by the end of the game, you might be taking 2 actions in a single turn, which gives you like 15 to 20 points and gets you, a whole bunch of resources and this and that. So it really feels fun as your kind of actions ramp up. The coolest thing about this game that I like is there's an action selection track. So if I choose one action, it goes from where it is back down to the lowest level of power. There's 5 levels of power, so as you use one, the others shift up, and so you really have to plan out, but still at the same time be flexible as to what's happening in the game. And it's a really thinky game. I actually think it works perfectly as a correspondence game. I'm a little nervous, actually. I've not played it in person, and I'm a little nervous at how challenging that might be. But online as a correspondence game, it's really, really fun, and that's why it's my number 3. My number 2 game of all time as of right now is Tapestry. Tapestry is a very lightly themed civilization game where there's 4 technology tracks, and on your turn, you're just picking one technology track that you want to move on, and that gives you resources. Again, it's a game where at the beginning of the game, you might get 1 or 2 resources on these tracks. But as the tracks move up and as your resources and your powers, I guess, within the civilization, your special abilities grow, you get to start doing these fun chain of events where this might happen, then this, then this. And the powers on these technology tracks get insane. And if you're able to reach to the very end of one of the technology tracks, it is awesome because there's so much fun stuff you can do. I think the game's broken. There's a few of the civilization cards that we found are way more powerful than others, and I haven't dived that much into online strategy talks, but from what I hear and what I've seen, there are some broken strategies as well. But I'm really not playing against anybody who's researching that type of thing, so I'm excited to find those out for myself. And yeah, it is current. This and Ark Nova are really my current hotness, and so I'm really excited to keep on playing. So that's my number 2, Tapestry. And my number 1 game of all time as of right now here in 2025 is Telestrations. Telestrations is more of a party game than a strategy game, but every single time I play, people are all over the floor laughing, having a good time. Essentially, this works with larger groups, 8 or above, 7 or above. Everyone sits in a circle. We usually just cut up scrap paper and they get a bunch of pieces of paper. And we usually have a theme, something like movie titles. So everybody writes down a movie title. After about 30 seconds of thinking of one, they pass it to the person on the right. So you receive a packet of paper with the movie title on top. So you flip the page and then you draw something so that the next person can correctly guess the movie title. So it's kind of like Pictionary, except you're passing it and oscillating between trying to guess the person in front of you's drawing and guess the movie title, or taking the movie title they've given you and drawing it so the next person in order can correctly guess that movie title. So you do this until your packet of paper and your movie title that you chose goes all the way back to the beginning, and then you just share and laugh as to what the bad guesses are and the bad drawings are. It's absolutely hilarious, and that's why it's my number 1. We play it every year at Christmas. We usually play it other times throughout the year as well. It's wonderful. It's hilarious. And yeah, it's just completely funny. So those are my top 10 games as of all time, starting, I guess, right now here in 2025. If you haven't heard of some of these, hopefully there are things that you might be interested in trying out, so I suggest checking them out. Really no links below except for the College Basketball Dynasty one. Just go to Google or your local game store and check them out. I did want to spend a few minutes here at the end of the video talking about board games and top 10 lists and stuff like that. So I started playing board games about 10 years ago. That was quite a while after I started playing Dungeons and Dragons and role-playing games. But it was really the Dice Tower, which used to be a podcast and kind of still is, but now they're like a giant production or network group that mostly operates out of YouTube and has conventions and cruises and all these things. But that's the reason why I got into board games, because I played a few cool board games. I was looking for more information and I found their podcast. One of the things they do every year is they do a top 100 around this time period where everyone, I think, in their organization goes through their top 100 games of all time. And I do that too. I've been doing that for 10 years, basically ever since I started board gaming, where I try and rank board games because thinking about games is not as fun as playing them, but it's pretty close, right? And so that's why I do these top 10 lists every single year. Generally speaking, when I think about a board game top 10 list, I think about, hey, it's game night. We got a bunch of people around and I'm going to pick any game I want to play. What would be at the top? Or, if there's a comparison, which one would I want to play before another? And that's kind of how I think about it. I also track the amount of times I play different board games and when. Do this on Board Game Geek, and that helps me determine which I like better. A good example here is Magic the Gathering. I haven't played Magic the Gathering that much in the last few years, even though I actually have had opportunities to. And what I noticed upon reflection is I've actually not played Magic the Gathering and instead I've played other games like Telestrations, and so that's why it fell a little bit lower on my list. That's kind of how I think about these lists. Some of the games on my list I did mention I played digitally, and I ran into a problem a few years ago when I was tracking the amount of games I played and how I thought about them, because a lot of games have an app, right? For example, Magic the Gathering has MTG Arena. Dominion now has a good app, apparently. I have not tried it, but they had a kind of a different app, a web app earlier. So a lot of these games you can play digitally, and I realized that the experience of playing digitally is just different than playing over the table with other people. And I wanted to really figure out what made board games special to me. And there's two things I found out. Board games are special because, number one, you're playing over the table. It's tactile. And number two, you're playing with somebody face to face, right? And so I realized, okay, in this digital world where everything has an app, how do I justify my board game hobby when compared to like video games and stuff like that? And I realized if I am playing digitally, then and it's with somebody I know, then I can count it kind of like in the sphere of board games. If I'm playing digitally against a computer or against someone I don't know, then that's more of a video game experience. And if I'm playing by myself, like a solo board game, then it has to be over the tabletop. Otherwise, I would kind of count that in the sphere of video games. It really doesn't matter, because if I'm gaming, I'm having fun, and that's really the main thing. But in terms of board games and what I would consider something that I enjoy in a board game experience, those are the types of things I think about. So so that is last thing I wanted to say, actually, how I track my top 10 or top 100, I guess. What I've done the previous years is I've printed out my entire, games I've ever played, as not all of them, but any game I would consider kind of good. And then I would cut them out, and then I would go through and compare each one to each other one. So I would basically take two, say I like game A better than game B, put them in a pile. Then I'd take the third game and I'd say, okay, game C, do I like that better than game B? If yes, it moves up the list. Now, is game C better than game A? Nope, it stays there in the order. Now, do that over and over and over until I was through my stack. That would give me a list of 100 games. What I finally decided to do this year was try out a website called PubMeeple, where you can import lists, and then it uses the pairwise method, I think, which basically says what's mathematically the least amount of decisions you have to make for us to make a representation of how you would rank these games. And it's very, very easy. It just compares two board games using the titles. I just click one and then it goes to the next one. I did that for like 2 or 3 hours one day, and then boom, my list was done. And so that's what I use now. So those are my top 10 board games as of right now here in 2025. Let me know in the comments below which ones you like, which ones you would like to try. Hope you liked this video, and I'll see you in the next video.